And we're live. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's time for Who Makes the News again. Online.
Yay! We're liking this online thing.
It's so much easier than disrupting a regular broadcast. So, Alicia, what is Who Makes the News?
Thanks, Sean. Well, Who Makes the News is the daily part of our radio show where we go through all of the print stuff, the media stuff, the print media, TV media, social media, online media, taking a look at the stories, picking out the ones that we think are interesting and saying, how gender balanced is it?
How indeed. So, this morning we did look at the Fiji Times because it's what comes to us on the regular.
Yeah, we're having
I don't know. But either way, what are the top stories that you have identified today?
Well, there are three, which I thought were quite interesting, to do with different sort of topics, kind of per se, but they're all interlinked. You can find the linkages in anything. So the first article is on page 2. It's featuring climate change, and there is currently a meeting on climate change held in the old capital of Fiji, Lumix, featuring lots of kind of stakeholders, youth as well, LGBT individuals are also taking part in it. And basically the article is on about making these kinds of policies more accessible for your average day Joe, or Joape, if you're in Fiji.
Or Joanna.
Thank you. Yeah.
Female name.
All right. In the gender equality, even in our analogies. Yeah, just kind of making it more accessible in the form of translating it into the, what's that word that you use? No. When you
Indigenous.
Sort of.
What do you mean?
When like you speak the language that's spoken by everyone.
Lingua franca.
That's the one, I think. Yeah, that's the one. So it's being translated into Itake, Hindi, and also English.
Did they translate it into Rituman?
I didn't think.
Probably not.
No, because
Poor Rituman.
The others.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So that was that. But it was interesting to note when it was talking about, accessibility, making it, easily readable for people. We had a discussion saying that Fiji doesn't have very good literacy rates.
We used to be a leader in terms of the Pacific in terms of our literacy rates, but in the past few days we haven't necessarily talked about it on Who Makes the News because there's nothing very exciting aside from primarily having our literacy and English language skills drop in the past few years. There have also been concerns about the quality of English used even by university graduates. And so in the news today, as well as in the past few days, there's also been a lot of talk around libraries and trying to get people to read again, because that has obviously dropped, and so the literacy has dropped and that kind of thing. So, I mean, we talked about it a little bit yesterday. What is really the issue in terms of, is it affordability of having this reading hobby? What should we actually do? Because there's a lot of literature out there, but what really is going to help us with our general expression? And so particularly if you are translating something into additional languages, we also have a couple of different issues with the Itoke language, because there are numerous dialects, some of which are dying, but because it's very much an oral language, how is it really translated into written language? And is it going to be accessible in that way, or is it just going to be used for those who can read it to share it with everybody else? How is it actually going to be distributed? So that'll be interesting to see, but I guess primarily with a lot of the translation, it does mean having to look at what are the words in use, and how do we make sure that something like climate change, because I imagine
it is about climate change,
is translatable in that. I mean, everyone knows the phrase climate change, but particularly in terms of the major components of ocean acidification, you have also intense off-season
weather events,
and then you also have overall climate shifting changes, extended dry spells,
which continues.
Yeah. What else?
So that was that one. Page 4, there was a picture of participants of a 3-day workshop held by the United Nations Development Programme to do with building capacity for young people in Fiji in terms of getting them more included in the decision-making spaces. Because it was interesting, it said that the voice of the youth is not being heard at 3 levels: community level, municipal level, and national level. And also the youth were kind of raising the issue of unemployment as well, which is something that we have heard in our own consultations across the 3 divisions earlier on in the year.
Yeah, it's very much, I mean, while women have to deal with the glass ceiling, youth have to deal with the stairs issue. And really, when is it legitimate to take youth into consideration? If they're leaders of the future, maybe they should just wait. And then equipping them with the knowledge of how to use your community level decision-making spaces, your municipal decision-making spaces, and your national decision-making spaces. How do you organize? How do you lobby? And those kinds of things. Something that to some extent the Young Women's Forum has also been doing. So the Fiji Young Women's Forum in the middle of the year held a capacity building training for members of the forum and their co-conveners, but also a couple other women from, young women primarily, obviously, from the movement about, we've had elections, we have no idea when we're going to have local level elections, but how do you really interact with those spaces to try and promote and create change? So it's an incredibly important skill and something that we don't teach in schools, and who knows if we ever will.
So it's really interesting that even at the 5th Fiji Women's Forum, the kind of the leaders for the co-conveners, right? They were talking about making sure that even within our own organizations, we practice what we preach. So you get your kind of traditional women leaders bringing along or identifying those young women leaders who they think, have the potential to be, to kind of take the movement forward in the next few years. So they also have this 1,000 campaign where they're kind of trying to get 1,000 women and making sure that they can also advocate and lobby with, their local government officials and even the national level parliamentarians.
So yeah, just generally, how do you engage and what makes a leader? And really, it's a lot of adjusting at a national level to this brand new democracy. Really, and it's something a lot of us have had to learn, particularly some who might be older in the movement, learning to work within the democracy that followed our elections last year, because a number of the systems have changed since 2006 as well. But just generally, there's a lot of practice that needs to happen, and it's good to see that they're involving young people. And the UNDP, particularly, even in the lead up to elections last year, I think, given that they are the UN agency responsible to those kinds of things, have also been working with governments to be more effective. Parliament particularly, rather than the government. So
it was kind of interesting because they're only speaking to one person in that actual article, and it was the president of the Bua Provincial Youth Council, which is, I think, the largest sort of council, one of them in the country. But there were pictures of the participants, both the young men and the young women, but they weren't being spoken to. So it was only, again, from that traditional official leadership position that was being highlighted in the paper, which is interesting.
And it would also be interesting to see how they're also interacting with these traditional structures, which are highly masculine as well. So particularly through the Indigenous leadership structures, you often have male leaders. And so if you have a woman in a position of leadership, it's really interesting to see, because she's often like the chief's wife or something, and so she has a really interesting power dynamic as well. But how do you make sure that that is positive, but also looking at it in a transformative way to say, yeah, sure, this is the status quo, but should we be changing it? Should we be adapting it? How do we have a gender balance here? Those kinds of fun things. Young people should be thinking about it.
Yeah, but also stuff about gender as well. This should come to the final article, which was interesting, involving our police force. They always say that admitting the problem is the first step.
The first step
so
to change.
Kudos, Fiji Police Force.
Thank you. You're almost there.
The police director legal is being quoted as the only source in the article, and basically saying that they are unfamiliar with the law on how to treat survivors, not victims. There's your first next step.
Try to say survivors unless they die.
Yeah,
which is usually our role.
Pretty much. So there you go. There's our top tip, Fiji Police Force. Basically, they just say that they don't know what the law is or how the law kind of tells their police officers to treat or work with cases of domestic violence. And we were just thinking, well, there's been a heck of a lot of workshops being done with the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. I know that's also been highlighted in the papers. They're also saying that they're partnering with the Ministry of Women. to kind of get that kind of aspect addressed. But it was just like, well, what more do you guys need?
Yeah. How do we make sure that it's actually effective, that you have effective training, and then you know how to work in that position? Because there is a lot of, there isn't even information outside of the traditional police force about how do you actually report if you are a survivor of particularly domestic violence. You know, because that uncertainty about what the process is also adds to people not actually reporting. You definitely need those structures to be supportive, because I think there's still a lot of societal challenges, like, oh, okay, so what did you do to make this happen? And so that really shouldn't be happening, because for a lot of, and we've even seen it in some of the unfortunate, you know, cases where we actually can't say survivors, because some women didn't actually survive, you know, their experiences of domestic violence, where it might have been a long-term thing, but they never really knew how to overcome the internal struggle to actually go about and report it. So that's also another interesting thing as well, that they need to consider and think about it as human beings.
But they've opened a helpline, or they're about to open a helpline. I know they've got the child helpline,
helpline,
which apparently both women and children are accessing, which is interesting.
A lot of them.
A lot of them. And they're also saying as well that it was interesting what times that they would get the calls. It would either be early in the morning or late at night, which would be about the time where, you know,
kids out of school as well.
Yeah. So I mean, there's one avenue, but it's interesting to see, you know, what will be, you know, taken forward from this.
Yeah, because then there are a whole lot of other things, like, should the police force be handling things like restorative justice in those situations where you have the survivor as well as the perpetrator of the violence come together and try and figure out how they're going to not necessarily solve the issue, but come to terms with it, because there are a lot of mental health onset effects as well. And we generally don't have very supportive mental health systems, as if you were watching yesterday or the day before that.
I think maybe the day before that, the 1.9% budget for mental health services.
Out of the whole health budget, not even the whole budget.
It's not, it doesn't even
just the health budget. And so,
I mean, seeing as today is World Suicide Prevention Day, right? And there'll be a march in Fiji. In Fiji, in Suva later this morning. Actually, it's starting right now.
Probably.
It's probably in progress, coming towards the end of it. Yeah, that is an issue. And you said something and it triggered something, but now it's gone.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Well, yes, so in terms of suicide, it has been noted that there are a lot of pressures around suicide. And of course, we don't have the disaggregated data, because who needs disaggregated data for, you know, the 400 plus people that have completed suicide in the last 4 years? It's fine. We don't need to understand the issue. But from a lot of anecdotal understanding, there are a lot of pressures and internalization of those pressures, as well as violent experiences. And so some women have tried it as a way out of their unfortunate situations, because they don't have family assistance or family help or support, because sometimes it's apparently just a thing you go through in your marriage.
Yeah, that's...
So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. And so, you know, if we talk about what kind of information do the police need, one, they need to humanize their services. And sometimes it is about having more women in the police force so that women feel far more comfortable. But just generally, everybody needs to understand and be well equipped and communicate properly, so that you don't have people that might want to report and they show up and they're like, oh, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want?
And then it just kind of makes them feel like, okay, I can't
actually,
because it doesn't feel safe and I don't feel right going to this person, because they're all like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really unfortunate that it might just take, you know, one case of bad communication for someone to
not report.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it for Who Makes the News today. Thanks for joining us, and if you do have any comments about anything that you've heard us gab on about today, then you can always give us a call on 3318160, or you can send your email to info@familypacific.org.fj. We also have a Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/ Family Pacific, like our page and then send us your comment that way, and click on the links that we've uploaded and read our peace card, because we are going through 21 days of peace.
Yes.
In build up to International Day of Peace on the 21st of September. And if you also want to listen to our other Who Makes the News podcast and various radio programs, you can also check those out on our Mixcloud account page. And the link will also be available on our Facebook page as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you did walk in at any point in the middle of this and you're like, video isn't for me, their faces are too intense.
The light is too much.
Enjoy the light. We are.
Yeah.
It's lovely to have sun in Suva.
Yeah.
And so you can always check out the audio-only version. And so that'll be cool. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.